The border between Spain and the British Overseas Territory of Gibraltar has been removed after years of post-Brexit wrangling between the United Kingdom and the EU. The Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez visited the site earlier on Wednesday. He said the removal of the fence closes an open wound and will usher in a new era of prosperity for the local people. Thousands of workers will now be able to cross between the two territories without checks.
Gibraltar and Spain share a turbulent history. After a period of significant tension, the British Overseas Territory is now moving closer to Spain. July 15th is set to go down in history. Alfredo Valencia is one of 15,000 Spanish commuters entering Gibraltar daily. The 56-year-old crosses here every morning. For him, the opening marks a special moment.
It's a mental relief. It used to take half an hour, 45 minutes, or even up to 3 or 4 hours just to get out. That was such a waste of time, and it was a source of despair. We're coming home from work, we want to eat, we need to relax.
Alfredo Valencia put up with this for years because he earns more in Gibraltar than on the Spanish side. In any case, the rock is booming. Every square meter is being developed, and the chief minister intends for this trend to continue.
That will give business certainty, it will give people certainty, it will give the world certainty that you can come and go from Gibraltar and Spain and the rest of the Schengen area without having to be worried about bureaucratic processes that have got in the way until now, slowing you down.
Gibraltar, with its 37,000 inhabitants, is located at the southernmost tip of Spain, next to the town of La Línea de la Concepción and just 15 kilometers from the coast of Africa. More than 6 million tourists visit Gibraltar annually, many for the cheap alcohol. However, one condition the EU and Great Britain agreed upon to open the border will be higher taxes.
So that's a significant increase, and therefore I think anybody trading in goods in Gibraltar is going to face challenges because their competitiveness is going to be eroded somewhat because of the higher taxes.
But Gibraltar is also known for its service providers, such as online betting companies. Opening the border could facilitate their expansion plans.
Obviously, office space, rental accommodation, everything is in quite short supply in Gibraltar. So having a wider choice would certainly be great for businesses and for individuals as well, I believe.
Many in the Spanish border region are optimistic. More jobs, more tax revenue, and more than just this new shopping center near the border.
I truly believe we have a historic opportunity here. There are companies based in Gibraltar that would like to establish a presence in the European Union. And La Linea is part of the European Union.
The relatively poor border town has plenty of space. The housing market has been feeling the effects of the border opening for months, with prices up 20%. Local real estate agents can't keep up with demand and are sounding the alarm.
My customers come from my local area. That is my target demographic, and given current prices, it's difficult for them to afford an apartment. It's all because of the opening of the border and the investments made over the past few months.
Long lines at the border are a thing of the past. However, new challenges await the area.
Well, joining me now is Jason Dittmer. He's professor of political geography at University College London. He has researched Gibraltar's strategic importance and how Brexit has shaped the notion of identity in Gibraltar. Professor, it's good to have you with us. So the fence has come down and the land border checks have ended, but controls have not disappeared. They've been moved to Gibraltar's airport, port, and surveillance system. So is this genuinely the end of a border?
Well, I think it's certainly the end of a kind of border, right? The kind of border that can be opened and closed or tightened and so on very easily. Whereas it's actually become much more the kind of border that a lot of us are used to, which is one that's kind of implemented through digital technologies and facial recognition. Often borders nowadays are no longer really at borders at all, but in databases and cameras and so on, all over the place.
About 96% of Gibraltar's voters wanted to remain in the European Union during the Brexit referendum 10 years ago. Does this treaty, does it finally repair some of the damage that Brexit inflicted on a territory that overwhelmingly rejected it?
I think it certainly avoids the worst possible damage that could have come from that. That was a real blow to Gibraltar, as I think you can see in the vote that they put forward. I mean, it's a rather striking percentage, isn't it? And so, but it isn't really a trip back to the past. It's not the status quo ante. It's rather a kind of transformation of the relationship between Gibraltar and Europe, and one that I think marks a new kind of era.
You know, Brexit was sold as Britain taking back control of its borders. Under this new agreement, Spanish officials will conduct Schengen checks at Gibraltar's airport and port. So I'm wondering, has Britain surrendered some control to secure an open border?
It's a good question. I think it's a slightly mistaken question, though, in that constitutionally Gibraltar is in charge of its own borders. And so, you know, hence you see the very complex negotiations that included the Gibraltarians and the British and the EU and Spain to try and come up with an acceptable formula for this. You know, how to include Gibraltar in the kind of borderless Europe, while not surrendering any of the kind of issues around sovereignty that are fairly well known. And I think they've come up with a pretty good situation. You know, there are still Gibraltarian border checks at the port and at the airport, but it's a layered kind of border with another round of border checks by the EU, which in this case will be Spanish officials, but they are technically operating on behalf of the EU. And you know, this is the kind of arrangement that actually we've gotten used to. As I say, borders are kind of found all over the place. And if you've ever boarded the Channel Tunnel train, the Eurostar, right? If you get on in London, you go through French border checks on this side of the channel and vice versa. So I think we're kind of, you know, dealing with a very effective solution to a complex situation.
Well, let me put it this way. For residents of Gibraltar, crossing into Spain is now easier. But many visitors arriving from Britain, they will face Schengen procedures, including, as you were talking about, biometric registration. Has Brexit then created an extraordinary situation in which Gibraltar is now easier to enter from Spain than from the United Kingdom?
I mean, I think that's true. I mean, strictly speaking, it is absolutely true. But I think that makes sense. You know, when you look at the geographical logic of the place, you know, this is what has made Gibraltar such a special case in the Brexit scenario. It's why it took 10 years to figure out, is because it is geographically, you know, hanging off of Europe as a peninsula. And Britain was never a kind of part of the Schengen area and so on. So to arrive at a solution here, you know, I think the British can present their passports, and the important thing is the Gibraltarians have got the settlement that they need to be kind of economically and in an everyday way secure.
I know that your own research has found that virtually all of the residents of Gibraltar surveyed believed that changes at the border would affect community cohesion and identity. I mean, what happens now to a population that sees itself as British, but whose everyday life and economy are inseparable from Spain and Europe?
I think you're absolutely right. And I'm pleased you read the paper. But I think, you know, it's really part of a much longer process of integration. You know, ever since Spain joined the EU and the frontier became governed by the EU's freedom of movement, you know, the frontier between Gibraltar and Spain, although complex, has been an open one in general. And so what we've seen is intense integration economically across the frontier. And I think really, in a way, Brexit marked the kind of disruption, and this is the solution to the disruption. So, we're really looking at sort of like 40 years of integration and the kind of blip of the Brexit interregnum, which is now being resolved.
I was looking at the numbers, too, just of workers. Around 15,000 people cross from Spain into Gibraltar for work every day. That's accounting for a huge share of Gibraltar's workforce. So was this new agreement ultimately driven less by diplomacy than by economic reality? Did, let's say, geography, did it simply defeat the politics of Brexit?
That's an artful way of putting it. Yes, both sides had an economic interest in ensuring that workforce can get in and out of Gibraltar. Gibraltar is dependent on that workforce. It simply doesn't have the space to host all the people who would actually work there if they could all fit in there. And certainly it makes the surrounding area more affluent because the jobs in Gibraltar tend to be better paid. And so it is an important employer for the entire region around Gibraltar. There's the wider Campo de Gibraltar, which is very economically dependent on Gibraltar. So nobody really benefits from trying to close that, obviously, and it's logistically really complicated. It is a one road in and one road out, and if you're going to get 15,000 workers in and 15,000 workers back out, plus all the day trippers and tourists who come and go very quickly as well to shop in Gibraltar and so on, you really have to have some kind of open border, and the EU's open border has now been replaced by the new agreement's border.
Professor Jason Dittmer with University College London. Professor, we appreciate your time and a fascinating discussion on the realities of border life. Thank you.
Thank you very much.